Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now it's not just the price of new PC parts that are super inflated at the moment, the used market isn't what it used to be either. With that said, there are still plenty of cheap second-hand desktops floating around on sites like eBay or Facebook Marketplace, and it makes a lot more sense to use one of these as the starting point for a cheap PC gaming build, because sourcing individual parts will likely work out more expensive. Hoping to put together another cut price computer with as little money and effort as possible, I placed a last minute bid on this Fujitsu mini tower. I've wanted one for ages, and because I only noticed this machine as the bidding was about to end, I didn't take much time to really think before throwing my hat into the ring. £30 was my bid. This was the starting price and the only bid before it ended, so naturally a few days later it arrived and I could start to assess potential upgrade options. I wasn't exactly overjoyed when I cracked open the side panel, but despite the proprietary motherboard and the odd layout, we still had an i3 processor and 8 gigs of memory, as well as a PCI Express slot. The included card was an HD 3450, and performance-wise it could barely handle Fallout New Vegas. I then thought, well, maybe we could try and create a 720p capable machine for £72. There was no real reasoning behind this, the numbers are just the same, and in today's market it seemed like a bit of a challenge to find a compatible graphics card for less than £40. Not to mention it needed to have no 6-pin power connector and work with a 250 watt power supply. About the only card that fit the bill was this 750. Now this actually cost £50, but between it arriving and me recording this voiceover, I managed to sell the old 3450 to a local PC repair shop for a tenner. This brought the total cost of the system to £70 including postage. At first I thought that 720p would probably be the limit in terms of what these specs could handle. That was certainly true for the more ambitious games I tried, like Far Cry 6 and Microsoft Flight Simulator. In Far Cry 6, enabling FSR made performance a tiny bit better than at native, but the game performed best at half of 720p, and even then we only just about hit 30 FPS most of the time. All it cost me was my eyesight, which honestly isn't that good anyway. The game looks like this without my glasses on. Microsoft Flight Simulator did a bit better and manages to look a bit sharper despite utilising 50% of 720p once again. I think it might look a bit sharper than Far Cry because we aren't surrounded by trees and foliage, which always look the worst at lower resolutions. Moving on to the games that seemed a little better suited to this system now, and I continued on at 720p because I didn't think that 1920 by 1080 would be possible, or if it was, it certainly wouldn't be playable, right? What I noticed at 720p is that we were quite CPU limited in a lot of situations, and although the average frame rates were okay, there were quite a few dips and stutters here and there, likely due to the fact that we've got 2 cores and 4 threads. The games I tested were all playable to a degree, especially considering we were making some big visual sacrifices, but we might be able to bump up the resolution to 1080p after all, and with that in mind I retested the majority of the games, but sensibly left out Far Cry 6 and Flight Simulator because after testing them briefly, the experience was not good. It wasn't even satisfactory. But this was to be expected. This isn't the sort of PC for those games. Even with the games I did test though, I was surprised by what our cheap Fujitsu could do. Realistically, you might want to think about a 30 FPS cap in some games, perhaps like the Witcher 3 and Fallout 4, so that the inevitable frame dips don't feel as bad, but because even these games run fine outside of busier built-up areas, it still seems like a bit of a waste of performance to do so, especially when you might see 50 or more frames per second at times. Truth be told, I'm not entirely sure why I purchased this PC. It might be because it had no bids on it and I wanted to save it from a life of being unused or worse, dumped. But on the other hand, it's nostalgic in a way. It reminds me of the days where we could put together cheap systems that would run everything, and not only that, prices of second-hand graphics cards were so low that it would only cost a few days' wages to actually get all the parts. I used to get paid £30 a week to go to school. It was a whole thing available for low-income families that ended about 10 years ago. It was supposed to go towards food and transport, but I had a car and I bought a packed lunch to school, so yeah, I used my money to build a PC instead. A PC that wiped the floor with the 360 and PlayStation 3 for way less money. Those days are gone, but this PC relives that moment for me a little bit. There are still bargains to be found though, and you can build a system that can play GTA or Fortnite for less than £100 or euros or dollars, even if your total spend might be a bit more than it would have been a year or so ago. Just keep an eye out on those second-hand sites, because there are certainly some machines that can be picked up cheap, and ones that will probably have a slightly better processor than this i3 as well. That's all for this one then. I hope you've enjoyed this look at what 2 cores and 1 gigabyte of VRAM can do in 2021. The answer as expected is not much, but you might be pleasantly surprised just like I was. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, leave a like down below, leave a dislike if you didn't, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.